Have you ever stood in a room full of people who should have known you best and realized not a single one of them saw who you really were? My name is Jasmine Carter. I'm 31 years old, and last Saturday I walked into the annual Carter family reunion wearing a simple navy dress, low heels, and the same quiet smile I've worn for the past decade. I made my rounds, gave polite hugs, and accepted the usual plastic praise. "Oh, Jasmine, always so dependable. Still at that same little job. You're lucky not to have real stress like the boys." Then came Aunt Deborah, my father's older sister, the self-appointed queen of etiquette and old money wisdom. Her sunglasses were perched on her head like a crown, and she held her rosé like a weapon. She looked me up and down with that familiar half-smile. "Still, a secretary, are we?" she said, loud enough for 3 nearby cousins to laugh. I didn't flinch. I'd rehearsed this moment in my mind more times than I could count. Because what Aunt Deborah didn't know, what none of them knew, was that just the day before I had reviewed the final draft of a $100 million acquisition deal, one that would determine whether the company they all clung to the Carter legacy would survive another year, and my signature was the one they needed. But let's rewind. Because this story doesn't start at a reunion. It starts in the Carter household in suburban Connecticut, in a 5-bedroom colonial with wraparound porches and wraparound expectations. To the outside world, we were pristine. Sunday brunch at the country club, matching sweaters for Christmas cards, business awards lining the hallway shelves. But behind that facade was a clear hierarchy, and I was never near the top. My father, Charles Carter, built Carter & Sons Development from the ground up. Real estate deals, commercial projects, municipal bids. He was sharp, commanding, and traditional to a fault. My 3 older brothers, Miles, Derek, and Julian, were practically born wearing little suits. Miles, the eldest, was the strategist, Derek, the salesman, Julian, the charming closer. They were molded for business, mentored at the dinner table, praised for breathing in the right direction. And then there was me, the girl, the helper. At family dinners, business was the main course. My brothers pitched ideas while my father corrected their language like a Fortune 500 CEO. I once suggested a cost-cutting initiative when I was 15. They laughed. Aunt Deborah actually patted my head. "Sweetheart," she'd said, "your talents lie elsewhere. Maybe design or charity work," and my mother, God bless her, had already sacrificed her career in marketing to raise us and support Dad's empire. She never said the words out loud, but her eyes always carried the same message. Don't challenge him. Just stay safe. The only person who ever truly believed in me was Grandma Eleanor, my dad's mother. She ran the books for her husband's furniture business for 30 years quietly without praise, but she saw right through all of them. "Still waters run deep," she used to whisper in my ear when I came to her crying after a rough family dinner. "Let them talk. Deep rivers move with purpose." She secretly paid for my first summer business course in high school, snuck me books on tech and startups, encouraged every wild little dream I had. And when she died my senior year of college, she left me a letter and a check. It wasn't much, barely enough to cover 1 semester, but she ended it with, "Make them regret dismissing you." I took those words to heart. But the moment that defined everything, I was 16. Carter & Sons was struggling with their marketing for a new urban development pitch. I'd overheard Dad worrying about investor sentiment, so I spent 3 weeks researching and compiling a proposal. Clean design concepts, updated language, and a revised budget allocation. I printed the whole thing, bound it in a blue folder, waited until dinner was winding down. I stood trembling and said, "I've been working on something I think might help the Uptown project." You'd think I'd just declared I was becoming a clown. My father furrowed his brow. My brothers smirked. Aunt Deborah let out a low chuckle. "Jasmine," my father said, "business decisions require experience. This is creative, but not practical." "Maybe try the prom committee," Derek added with a grin. I nodded, silently, walked upstairs, and cried until I couldn't breathe. That night I swore something to myself. One day I'd build something that couldn't be ignored, something so undeniable, so powerful that they would have no choice but to see me. But I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't explain. I'd let success speak for itself. That was the beginning of my double life. But I had no idea that success, real, measurable, empire-building success, would come with a loneliness I never expected. College became my escape, not just from Connecticut or my family, but from the small, pre-written life they'd scripted for me. My brothers went to Ivy Leagues. I chose Connecticut State, not because I couldn't get into the others, but because I knew I needed space to build, not just study. They thought I was settling. My father said, "At least it's affordable." Aunt Deborah quipped, "Maybe you'll meet a nice accountant." What they didn't know was that I was double majoring in business administration and computer science, attending night classes, working during the day to pay for the extra courses, and pouring every spare hour into learning how technology was reshaping industries, including theirs. I kept my updates vague. School's going fine, I'd say, during Sunday calls, thinking about working in admin somewhere after. That always made them sigh with relief. I played it safe. Let them believe what they wanted. It was during my sophomore year that I met Professor Lauren Reeves, a former Silicon Valley executive turned educator, the kind of woman who commanded a room with nothing but a stare and spoke in blunt truths wrapped in purpose. She assigned us a case study on industry disruption. I submitted a 12-page report analyzing how real estate development was failing to integrate modern data analytics. She returned it with a single comment: "Come see me after class." I was sure I'd crossed a line. But when I sat in her office, she looked at me over her glasses and said, "You see patterns. You don't just absorb data, you interrogate it. That's rare." We started meeting every Friday afternoon. She became my mentor, my mirror, my reminder that I wasn't crazy for dreaming bigger. She told me if your family won't fund your ambition, fund it yourself, but never shrink to fit their comfort. That line stayed with me. The summer after junior year, I landed an internship at a mid-sized tech firm called Vertex Solutions. To my family, I said I was an admin assistant. Technically, I was, on paper. But I made it my mission to sit in every strategy meeting I could. I volunteered for tasks no one wanted, took notes like my life depended on it. By the end of the summer, I was the one presenting those notes to the executive team. Back at school, I used what I learned to start developing a concept, a platform that could help real estate developers manage contractors' track permits and predict regulatory delays before they happened. Sound familiar? Yeah, I was fixing the exact problems Carter and Sons had been struggling with for years. I remember testing the early wireframes in my dorm room, coffee-stained notebooks scattered everywhere, a whiteboard borrowed from the math department. I'd work until 3 a.m. crash for 2 hours, then wake up and do it all again. After graduation, I took what looked like a safe job, an executive assistant role at another tech firm, Civic Logics. It paid just enough. And more importantly, it kept my resume aligned with the narrative I needed my family to see. Still assisting someone my dad asked one weekend over brunch. "Yup," I said. "Lots of calendar management." What I didn't mention was that I was building my own calendar platform, one that would eventually integrate with permit systems across 4 states. I filed the LLC under a name they'd never connect Clarity Core Tech. I bought a cheap domain, hired 2 freelance coders off a startup forum, reached out to Professor Reeves for advice. She responded in 2 lines: "If it's crazy, you're on the right track. Let me know when you're pitching." I pitched and pitched and pitched. 27 rejections, some polite, most not. The feedback was always the same: too green, too ambitious, 2 women trying to do what a team of 10 couldn't. Because by then I had met Allison Chang, a brilliant back-end engineer I found on a subreddit. We shared a vision, and we shared a chip on our shoulders. Late one night after a demo crashed again, she looked at me and said, "You know what? The worst part is, if we were 2 of your brothers, we'd already have a seed round." We laughed. Then we cried. Then we fixed the damn demo. It wasn't until pitch number 28 that things shifted. Samuel Knox, a retired fintech executive with a sharp eye and a deep pocket. After our demo, he leaned back and said, "I've seen 100 decks this month. Yours is the first one solving a real problem from the inside." He invested $250,000, just enough for us to go full-time. I told my family I'd gotten a promotion. "Now I assist a private investor," I said. "Still no boyfriend?" Aunt Deborah asked. "No time," I replied with a grin. They assumed I'd plateaued, but I was just getting started. We were 2 women, 2 laptops, and a dream. And in less than a year, our little idea would start making waves no one could ignore. The day we moved into our first office space felt like entering a new chapter, one lined with chipped paint, questionable wiring, and a faint smell of mildew. It was the cheapest lease we could find in a rundown building on the outskirts of San Francisco's industrial district, but to us, it was a palace. Allison and I dragged in a pair of second-hand desks, rolled up our sleeves, and taped a vision board to the wall that read, "Real estate tech is broken. We're going to fix it." Our days blurred. 18-hour sprints, instant noodles, cold coffee, whiteboard walls filled with scribbles, corrections, and impossible equations. We worked with obsessive focus, each small breakthrough like oxygen. Our biggest obstacle, regulation modeling. Real estate projects could sink over compliance oversights, but every jurisdiction handled things differently. Allison dove deep into code while I mapped out dozens of real-world scenarios based on what I'd grown up overhearing at Carter & Son's boardroom dinners. 3 months in, everything almost fell apart. Our algorithm crashed repeatedly. Nothing aligned. We were exhausted and demoralized. On the 3rd night of trying to rebuild it from scratch, Allison threw her pen across the room and said, "Maybe we bit off more than we can chew." I stared at our wireframe. I hadn't slept in nearly 40 hours. My chest was tight. But something clicked. I grabbed a dry erase marker and drew a new logic loop, then another, and then it hit us. We'd been optimizing for process, not priority. When we ran the new model, it worked. Flawlessly. We sat in stunned silence watching real-time projections dance across the screen. And then I laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time in weeks. "We can actually do this," I whispered. Our first client was a small developer in Phoenix. They'd found us through a forum where I'd quietly posted about our beta software. They were struggling with a $20 million mixed-use project that had hit snags over unexpected environmental remediation fees. We plugged them into our prototype, and within 10 days, our dashboard flagged an overlooked compliance clause that would have cost them $1.2 million in fines. They paid us $10,000, but what they gave us was worth so much more proof of value. Word spread. By month 6, we had 4 clients, then 9. But back in Connecticut, I was still the family assistant. Thanksgiving that year was a masterclass in performance. I flew home wearing a $40 coat I'd bought at a thrift shop just to avoid drawing attention. Over dinner, my brothers bragged about new projects. Miles talked mergers. Derek shared sales milestones. Julian told some story about finessing a permit in record time. Then Aunt Deborah turned to me. "And what about you, Jasmine Still?" Scheduling and answering phones, I smiled. Something like that. No one asked a follow-up. No one cared. What they didn't know was that I'd just signed our 10th client, a firm whose name they'd all recognize. At that point, maintaining the illusion became an art. I had 2 separate bank accounts, a decoy LinkedIn, even a second email address just for family communication. Why? Because I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to expose myself to their scrutiny, to their skepticism, to the subtle smiling disapproval that had crushed me at 16. I didn't want a family debate. I wanted results. And by the end of year 1, I had them. We rebranded to Clarity Core Tech, secured $2 million in seed funding, and hired our first 2 employees. We moved into a new office this time with windows. I remember standing at the glass one night, watching the sun dip below the skyline and thinking, they still think I'm answering phones. Meanwhile, I'm leading board meetings. But the truth was, I miss them. Not their validation, but the idea of family. That fantasy where your father looks at you with pride, where your brothers ask for your input because they actually respect your insight, where Aunt Deborah tells you you've made something of yourself. But fantasies are dangerous, so I tucked those feelings away and kept building. We launched our first full-scale platform release the following quarter. It integrated contractor logs, budget tracking, permit forecasts, and regulatory AI all in one dashboard. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than anything the industry had seen. We called it Pulse Grid, and Pulse Grid exploded. Our beta testers turned into advocates. Reviews rolled in. We started trending on niche forums, then industry blogs. A month later, I received a LinkedIn message from a mid-level exec at Carter & Sons. They were shopping for solutions after a compliance failure had stalled one of their key projects. The irony made me dizzy. I didn't reply, but it was only a matter of time before the worlds I'd kept separate for so long would crash into each other, and when they did, it would be at the worst possible moment. There's a certain thrill to building a secret empire, a quiet satisfaction in knowing the truth while everyone around you assumes you're still that girl who once spilled juice on her father's briefcase. But secrets get heavy, and the more Clarity Core Tech grew, the more tangled my life became. I opened a shell LLC to manage my personal wealth, no trace of the Carter name. I created a separate email domain, one my family would never associate with me. I even rented a modest apartment back in Connecticut just so they'd think I was still local despite living full-time in a penthouse in downtown San Francisco. I got good at playing roles. To my investors, I was the sharp, fearless founder. To my employees, I was the quiet force who led from behind a locked office door, solving problems while they slept. To my family, I was still their Jasmine, the safe one, the nice one, the one who didn't make waves, until one day, I almost got caught. We were presenting Pulse Grid 2.0 at a national real estate tech conference in Boston. Huge venue, huge press. My name was nowhere on the agenda. Our COO, Tara, was listed as the face of the company. Standard protocol. But as I walked through the convention hall that morning, Starbucks in hand, I froze. Across the floor, dressed in a sleek gray suit, was Julian, my brother. I ducked behind a banner, heart racing, hands trembling. He was talking to a rep at a competitor's booth, laughing smooth as ever. If he had turned around just 5 feet more, he would have seen me. Tara caught up with me backstage 10 minutes later and found me pale and panicked. "Are you okay?" she asked. "My brother is here," I whispered. "We have to delay the demo." We swapped out speakers, moved the time slot. Julian never knew. But that night, I sat alone in my hotel room and stared out the window, wondering how long I could keep this up. Clarity Core Tech had grown to 42 employees. We had 5 Fortune 100 clients, a user base doubling every quarter, and still I lied to my family every single day. Then came the text, "From my mother, emergency family meeting this weekend. Your father insists. No exceptions." My stomach dropped. Family meetings weren't common, and they never came from my mother. I called her immediately. "Is everything okay?" A pause. "Your father will explain. Just be here Friday night, please." I rearranged my week, told my assistant to cancel my Friday board call, booked the red-eye. What I walked into was not a family meeting. It was a full-blown crisis. Carter & Sons was imploding. Their flagship project, the Westbrook redevelopment, had collapsed under cost overruns, legal setbacks, and poor contractor oversight. A $60 million loss. My father looked 10 years older. My mother's hands shook as she served tea. Julian's charm had evaporated. Miles paced the room. Derek refused to make eye contact. I sat quietly absorbing it all, feeling a strange mixture of grief and vindication. Everything they were facing, delayed permits, missed compliance windows, mismanaged budgets, was exactly what Clarity Core solved. But I said nothing. Not yet. "We have 2 options," my father said eventually. "Maxwell Holdings has offered to acquire a controlling interest. They're sharks, but they'll keep the lights on." I swallowed hard. Maxwell was infamous. They gutted everything they touched. "There's one more offer," my mother said quietly. An investment firm called Vantage Capital, private group. They're offering better terms and we'd retain a minority stake. I blinked. Vantage Capital was us. Clarity Corp's investment arm. My baby. They had no idea. We're meeting with Vantage's CEO on Sunday, my father added. If it goes well, we sign Monday. Otherwise, Maxwell takes over. I nodded, feigning interest, my mind racing. They were about to walk into a boardroom with me, and they didn't even know it. I had 48 hours to decide stay silent and let them sign, or reveal the truth and risk everything. My secret, my control, my company, it was all about to collide. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid of being exposed, but because I was choosing for the first time in my adult life to stop hiding. I stood in front of the hotel mirror that morning and stared at a version of myself my family had never seen. Tailored charcoal gray suit, silk blouse, Eleanor's diamond earrings, the ones she wore when dealing with men who underestimated her, hair tied back into a sleek chignon. No trace of the harmless little secretary remained. Downstairs, my executive team had already assembled. Allison, Tara, Robert, and Jessica, my inner circle. My family in every way that mattered. Are you sure about this? Allison asked one last time. No, I said honestly. But it's time. I took the elevator up to the conference room 10 minutes early. I wanted to be there when they walked in. I wanted to see their faces. 5 minutes later, I heard them. My father's clipped voice, my brother's low murmurs, Martin Sterling's calming tone, trying to explain that the CEO was already here. They entered still talking until they saw me standing at the head of the long glass table, back straight, arms folded. My father blinked. Jasmine, what are you doing here? Julian laughed nervously. You're lost, Mac. This is a private meeting. I met their eyes one by one. Then I said clearly, take a seat. They hesitated, but something in my voice made them obey. Martin sat, first followed by Miles. My father remained standing. Jasmine, this isn't I'm the CEO of Vantage Capital, I said, calm, precise, and the founder of Clarity Corp Tech, the parent company. Silence. Then Miles scoffed. No, you're not. I've been leading Clarity Corp for 8 years, I continued. Our investment division identified Carter & Sons as a strategic opportunity. The negotiation team didn't know the connection. I halted the deal when I realized the overlap. My father sat down, hard. Martin pulled out his phone and frantically searched for confirmation. I gestured to the door. Bring in the team. Allison, Tara, Jessica, and Robert entered like a force of nature, tablets in hand, prepared, professional. This is my executive team, I said. We've prepared a revised proposal. You'll find that the terms still stand $100 million in capital, a 20% retained equity stake, and full debt assumption. You're serious, Derek whispered, stunned. You're the one we've been pitching to. No, I corrected. You weren't pitching. You were hoping. I did the work. I built the platform that solves every problem your company ignored. And you lied to us, Miles snapped. For years. You never asked, I said softly. You assumed. Julian leaned forward, eyes narrowed. So this is revenge. No, I said. This is business. Then Aunt Deborah burst into the room. Late as always, she took one look at the scene. Me at the head of the table, the stunned faces, and smirked. Well, this must be a mistake, she said, sliding into a chair. Someone get the real CEO. I am the CEO, I said. Deborah blinked. Of what? The catering of Clarity Corp Tech and Vantage Capital, and of the company that's offering to save Carter & Sons from liquidation. More silence. Then Tara clicked a button on her tablet. The screen behind me lit up with logos, stats, press features, and at the center my name. Jasmine Carter, founder and CEO. I watched their faces. My father gripped the edge of the table like the floor had shifted. Martin looked like he'd seen a ghost. Aunt Deborah's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Finally, my father spoke. All this time, You were building this. I nodded. We're not just acquiring assets, we're offering a future, but it comes with terms. New leadership, new systems, new vision, and if we say no, Miles asked, arms crossed. Then Maxwell takes over. I held his gaze, and you lose everything. For the first time in my life, the room went quiet because they didn't know what to say. And I did. But even after the reveal, healing wasn't automatic. Respect doesn't bloom overnight. And forgiveness, that would take more than a boardroom bombshell. 6 months later, I stood in the atrium of what used to be Carter & Sons headquarters. The freshly minted glass sign behind me now read, Carter Clarity Tower. The merger was complete. The integration messy, brutal, necessary. I watched as employees, some mine, some inherited, mingled during the reopening ceremony. Tara handed out name tags, Robert chatted with new investors, and Allison was already deep in a conversation about next-gen platform features. And me, I was learning how to stand still in my own skin. The hardest part about the reveal wasn't proving my success. It was facing what it cost me. My father had stepped back, officially titled Chairman Emeritus, unofficially retired. It wasn't graceful. For weeks, he'd walk into strategy meetings and forget he was no longer the loudest voice in the room. Eventually, he stopped attending altogether. Miles took the Maxwell deal personally. He left, moved to Chicago to launch a boutique firm, claimed he was starting something that wouldn't betray his values. He hasn't called since. Derek hung on a little longer, tried to adapt. He lasted 4 months before quitting, citing culture clashes. But Julian surprised me. He approached me 2 weeks after the boardroom reveal, hands in his pockets, eyes clear. I don't know how to fix what we broke, he said, but if there's a place where I can actually be useful, I want to learn. Now he runs our community outreach and sustainability initiatives. He reports directly to Tara, and for the first time in his life, he listens more than he talks. My mother, she sat me down 2 months after the merger, tears in her eyes. I should have fought for you, she said. I let my own compromises become the ones I handed down to you. I'm so sorry, Jasmine. That conversation cracked something open. She's now volunteering with the Eleanor Foundation, our nonprofit arm dedicated to mentoring young women in tech and entrepreneurship. Watching her rediscover her voice after decades of silence has been healing in ways I didn't expect. Aunt Deborah, of course, hasn't changed. She still insists I got lucky. She tells people I married well, which is hilarious, since I'm very much single by choice and busier than any man could handle. But I don't mind, because I don't need her approval, not anymore. What mattered was standing at that podium during the merger press conference and saying out loud, this company is no longer just about legacy. It's about leadership, vision, reinvention, and the future we choose to build. I started getting messages after that, from young women, from underdog founders, from people who had been dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. They wrote, "Your story reminded me of mine. You made me believe again. If you did it, maybe I can too." That's what success means now. Not just profit margins, not just market share, but power that lifts, visibility that inspires, a voice that doesn't whisper anymore. Tonight, as I walk through the 12th floor, I pass a framed photo outside my office. It's a picture of Grandma Eleanor sitting at her old desk sleeves, rolled up calculator in hand, smirking at the camera like she knew exactly what she was doing. Beneath it, a plaque reads, "For every woman told to stay quiet, build anyway." I pause, place a hand on the glass and whisper, "We did it." Because the truth is, yes, I built a $350 million company. Yes, I rescued my family's legacy. But the real win, I did it without asking for permission, without shrinking, without letting their limitations become mine. I'm Jasmine Carter. I was the secretary in their eyes for 8 years, and now they report to me. Have you ever been underestimated by those closest to you? Told you weren't enough, that your dreams were too much? I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. And if mine resonated with you even just a little, hit like, subscribe, and send this to someone who needs the reminder. They don't have to see your worth for it to be real. Thank you for listening, and never forget, sometimes the people who know you least are the ones you've known the longest.